One of the little things that I love in The Lord of the Rings is something that Aragorn says very late in the book, in the chapter Many Partings. We are outside of Fangorn Forest with a group of travelers who have made their way here from Minas Tirith after the crowning of King Elisar, or Aragorn, and his marriage to Arwen Andomiel. The group was formed as a procession to bring the body of King Theoden to his final rest in Rohan. Ultimately, though, it's a journey of goodbyes, as the various participants in the War of the Ring make their way to their various homes. Legolas and Gimli are among them, and before they head north to where they reside, they are going into Fangorn, per the agreement made back in the days of the fight against Saruman. "Come, Gimli," said Legolas. "Now, by Fangorn's leave, I will visit the deep places of the Entwood, and see such trees as are nowhere else to be found in Middle-earth. You shall come with me, and keep your word." To this Gimli agreed, though with no great delight, it seemed. "Here then at last comes the ending of the Fellowship of the Ring," said Aragorn. "Yet I hope that ere long you will return to my land with the help that you promised." "We will come, if our lords allow it," said Gimli. And I find this a wonderful moment, because it is the only time in the entire book, which has gone along for over 1,200 pages at this point, it's the only time when that group of individuals, originally 9 in number, who were brought together by Elrond Half-Elven, and who departed from Rivendell on December 25th, Third Age 3018, 9 walkers to match the 9 riders who are evil, by name Frodo Baggins, Samwise Gamgee, Meriadoc Brandybuck, and Peregrine Took, representing the hobbits, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and Boromir of Gondor, representing men, Legolas of the Woodland Realm, representing the elves, Gimli, Glóin's son, representing the dwarves, and finally, Gandalf the Grey, or Mithrandir, one of the Istari. It is the only time in the entire book where this group is called the Fellowship of the Ring. It's very true. Check out the Digital Tolkien Project if you doubt, and search for the word fellowship. It appears, but not very often, and not as the name of that group. Instead, the collection of 9 walkers is called the Company. The Company of the Ring shall be 9. Therefore, Boromir will also be in the Company. For otherwise I shall follow the Company. In 7 days the Company must depart. He was the only member of the Company that did not seem depressed. The first time we get that word, fellowship, with regard to this group, is not at its forming in Rivendell, which those who only know the movie might be surprised at. The group,
the Fellowship of the Ring,
isn't even formed at the time the movie shows it being done, directly at the end of the Council of Elrond. It actually takes place days afterward in the text. No, the first time we get the word fellowship with regard to this group is not at its beginning, but at its ending, which is to say, Book 2, Chapter 10, The Breaking of the Fellowship. So it's sort of funny that they haven't even been named as such until they're breaking up. Well, not exactly. Because the prologue to the book does make reference to the Hobbit members of the Fellowship, with a capital F, indicating this group. So I guess I'm wrong about Aragorn's reference being the first time? Oh no, because it's important to remember that the prologue, and especially the note on the Shire records where this reference comes, is very much a document written after the events of The Lord of the Rings. References are made in it to the tale of Aragorn and Arwen, for example, and the book that Merry writes, Urblor of the Shire, and other events which take place well after the ring has been destroyed. And so it is taking place at a time when the name of this group, as the Fellowship, had already taken hold. Likewise, in the appendices and the Tale of Years, on February 26th of Third Age 3018, we see occurring breaking of the Fellowship with a capital F. But that is another document written well after the events of The Lord of the Rings. While the quest and the war are going on, as we have seen, the group is not called that. And the argument can be made that even in Chapter 10, the title, The Breaking of the Fellowship, is not really referring to the name of the group. I see it as more referring to what the group has come together in. Fellowship, that is, as the true meaning of that word would have it. A deep, close association of people around a shared interest or concern. The distinction is right there in the chapter. As it tells us, this group, the company, arrive at Parthgalen with some major work to be done. The time has come for them to decide what they are going to do now, where they will go, and especially what they will do with the ring. And Aragorn asks the group, "What shall become of our company that has traveled so far in fellowship?" Note the use of the capitalization. Company with the capital C, as has been done all the way prior to this, and fellowship with the lowercase f. And here we have the distinction between these two words. Company, which is really just a group of folks, and fellowship, which is a state of being within which such a group has come together. There are other such differentiations throughout, most notably when Frodo meets Faramir. Frodo begins by saying that he and Sam, we two halflings, may be all that remain of our fellowship. Fellowship again being lowercased. Yet, several times he references the company with the capital C. When I and my servant left the company. There was no contention in our company, and Gandalf he names as the leader of our company. Even with that, Faramir seems to understand the connection which brought the company together, when he says, "An evil fate seems to have pursued your fellowship." Lowercase f. Much later, after all has been accomplished and the ring destroyed, and everyone is recovering at the field of Cormallen, we read, "There, Frodo and Sam learned much of all that had happened to the company after their fellowship was broken on the evil day at Parthgalen by Rauros Falls." Similarly, in the Flotsam and Jetsam chapter, Gimli refers to that day at Parthgalen as that strange day when our fellowship was broken. Lowercase f both times. And it's with these instances that we truly get that difference. That this is not the name of a group. That the fellowship of the ring is actually the bond that holds these 9 together. Because they're still a company, even when they have been broken with the death of Gandalf in Moria. But the fellowship that they have and not are, is broken at Parthgalen, thanks to Boromir and his lust for the ring. That is the breaking which the title of the chapter is talking about. That deep association among them all has been subverted by the evil that is the ring. Despite that, though, the fellowship among them is still alive, and it continues on as all of them, each in their own way, seeks to do what the company had been brought together in fellowship to do, that being to destroy the ring. It actually continues on even with the ring destroyed, because as is noted in the Steward and the King chapter, the hobbits still remained in Minas Tirith with Legolas and Gimli, for Aragorn was loath for the fellowship to be dissolved, lowercase. And then, just one paragraph later, we read, In those days, the companions of the ring dwelt together in a fair house. Capital C. So we are still differentiating between group itself and what holds the group together. But then, after all that has passed and been accomplished, Aragorn, outside of Fangorn, when the goodbyes are being said, he feels compelled, it would seem, to bring back to everyone's mind that close association, that bond, as well as the hope, a fool's hope though it might have been, which they all had from the very beginning, and which has brought them all to this point. And he does so not just by bringing up that bond with the use of the word, but by renaming the group itself. No longer are they the Company of the Ring. No, they are now the Fellowship of the Ring. Capital letter now in place. And I think at this point it's worth an admittedly lengthy aside to ask a question. If all that is so, why the heck is the first book of the trilogy called The Fellowship of the Ring? Since that's the start of everything and they aren't known by that until the end. Why not call it the Company of the Ring or the Companions of the Ring? Well, it's important first to understand a key element of The Lord of the Rings. That being that it is not a trilogy. It is a single book by the name of The Lord of the Rings. It just happens, thanks to its great length, to have been published in 3 volumes, which is not a radical thing, at least in the world of British novels in the 19th century. As Wikipedia tells us, in a time when books were relatively expensive to print and bind, publishing longer works of fiction had a particular relationship to a reading public who borrowed books from commercial circulating libraries. A novel divided into 3 parts could create a demand. Part 1 whetting an appetite for parts 2 and 3. The income from part 1 could also be used to pay for the printing costs of the later parts. Jane Austen's novels, among others, received this treatment. But whoever the author was, it was the fact of there being 3 volumes to the whole that matters. The difference between this and a true trilogy is pretty obvious, as a trilogy is a collection of 3 separate and distinct books, all within a series, rather than a single book broken into 3 parts. There are many examples of this, in many genres. The Lord of the Rings, however, is not one of them. In the words of Tolkien biographer Humphrey Carpenter,
The Lord of the Rings is a very, very big book. I mean, in 3 volumes. I think it's about 750,000 words.
it also, as Tolkien famously said later, grew in the telling. And this growth can be seen thanks to Christopher Tolkien's monumental History of Middle-earth series, specifically the volumes covering the writing of The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien was finding his way, sometimes making excellent progress and sometimes moving very slowly, but always with very little idea what he was going to find along the way. As a result, his progress, such as it is at times, can also be seen in his letters to his publisher, Stanley Unwin, of the firm Allen and Unwin. Tolkien effectively began the book at the beginning of 1938. By December 1942, he wrote, "It is now approaching completion." By June of 1944, however, he admits of the Hobbit sequel, as he was calling it, that not a line on it was possible for a year, but I hope at last soon to be able to submit a chunk to you. By March 1945, he wrote that the great Hobbit sequel is not finished. I made an effort last year to finish it and failed. You shall, of course, have it for consideration the moment it is done, if it ever is. And by July 1946, he was promising that I am putting The Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit sequel, before all else, save duties that I cannot wriggle out of. Various things, his health, his academic work, the war, as well as a certain degree of writer's block at one point, all conspired to keep him from finishing. By 1947, though, a draft of the book was able to be read. The trend of 3-volume novels, however, was not exactly the fashion at this time. Yet the length of the book, and the paper rationing which was still going on in England even so many years after the end of World War II, meant that publishing it in one volume was going to be prohibitively expensive. "I am afraid we are frightened," wrote Stanley Unwin to Tolkien in 1952, "by the very great length of the book, which, with the present cost of paper, does mean a very big outlay," meaning that which the publisher would have had to spend of their own money to produce the books. The estimated cost would have been £3 10s. To that, Tolkien wrote, in letter 135, "I regret very much, in some ways, having produced such a monster in such unpropitious days. £3 10 or more would certainly be a very big price for any book, even today." Could they not be split into 3 or 4, to some extent self-contained volumes? The publisher queried. Now, at this time, Tolkien was jockeying to have the Silmarillion published along with The Lord of the Rings, which he insisted was necessary, and which he, erroneously, estimated to be about the same length as The Lord of the Rings. Allen and Unwin would be publishing works totaling a very daunting 1 million words. After some tense negotiations, the Silmarillion was dropped from the plan. But The Lord of the Rings was considered a prestige book, which the firm did still want to publish. The feeling was, though, that they would lose £1,000 in the endeavor. But, as Stanley Unwin revealed in his memoir, he said, "If you think this to be a work of genius, then you may lose £1,000. And who did he say this to? His son, Rayner. Now, Rayner Unwin holds a special place within the Tolkien legendarium, at least as far as the publishing of it goes, because Rayner has the curious distinction of being the person who, in essence, greenlit The Hobbit. He was only 10 years old at the time, and he was quasi-employed by his father to read children's book manuscripts. As Rayner related, his father felt that the best judge of children's books was children. So, Rayner would read submitted manuscripts, write a report on them, and then he would be paid a shilling. One of these manuscripts was The Hobbit. Happily, we still have the report that Rayner wrote. "Bilbo Baggins was a hobbit who lived in his hobbit hole and never went for adventures. At last, Gandalf the wizard and his dwarves persuaded him to go. He had a very exciting time fighting goblins and wargs. At last, they get to the Lonely Mountain. Smaug, the dragon who guards it, is killed, and after a terrific battle with the goblins, he returned home, rich." This book, with the help of maps, does not need any illustrations. It is good and should appeal to all children between the ages of 5 and 9. A glowing report indeed, for which Rayner was paid his shilling, which, as he later said,
which was probably the best shilling this firm's ever spent, and the book was published.
That was in September 1937. By 1952, he was very much not a child, and now an official employee of Allen and Unwin, and he was in charge of bringing The Lord of the Rings to print. It was his declaration that the book was a work of genius, as well as his estimation of £3 10s if the book was published in one volume. He also called it a big risk. As Carpenter's biography of Tolkien reads, "After calculations and discussions in the Allen and Unwin offices, it seemed that the best thing would be to divide the book into 3 volumes, which could be sold, with only a small profit margin, at 21 shillings each. This was still a lot of money, rather more than the top price for a novel, but it was the best that could be done." With that settled, the question remained of what to call these volumes. Presumably they could have gone with the extremely nondescriptive Part First, or Volume 1, as did the Jane Austen novels. But that was not going to be the case here. Rayner did not think that desirable. Carpenter continues. Although the book was one continuous story, it was felt that it would be best if it appeared volume by volume under different titles, thus earning 3 sets of reviews rather than 1, and perhaps disguising the sheer size of the book. Tolkien was never entirely happy about the division, and he insisted on retaining The Lord of the Rings as the overall title. It was already divided into 6 books, which Tolkien admitted in Letter 139 was purely a matter of convenience with regard to length, and has no relation to the rhythm or ordering of the narrative. He wrote to Rayner in March 1953 that, "I have given some thought to the matter of subtitles for the volumes, but I do not find it easy, as the books, though they must be grouped in pairs, are not really paired, and the middle pair, 3 and 4, are not really related. Would it not do if the book titles were used, for example, The Lord of the Rings, Volume 1, The Ring Sets Out and The Ring Goes South, Volume 2, The Treason of Isengard and The Ring Goes East, Volume 3, The War of the Ring and The End of the Third Age? If not, I can at the moment think of nothing better than 1. The Shadow Grows, 2. The Ring in the Shadow, 3. The War of the Ring or The Return of the King." An editorial note to this letter in the collection of Tolkien letters makes reference to a list of contents to The Lord of the Rings that was written by Tolkien, and which indicates a different set of titles. Volume 1, The First Journey and The Journey of the Nine Companions. Volume 2, The Treason of Isengard and The Journey of the Ring-bearers. Volume 3, The War of the Ring and The End of the Third Age. A letter from August 1953, 139, has Tolkien suggesting to Rayner 1. The Return of the Shadow, 2. The Shadow Lengthens, and 3. The Return of the King. Later that month, he wrote another letter to Rayner, 140. "I now suggest as titles of the volumes, Volume 1, The Fellowship of the Ring, Volume 2, The Two Towers, Volume 3, The War of the Ring, or, if you still prefer that, The Return of the King." Of Volume 3, he goes on to say that he prefers The War of the Ring, since it gets in the ring again, and also is more non-committal and gives less hint about the turn of the story. Meaning, of course, that The Return of the King was giving away the fact that Aragorn would become king. He had reservations, too, about the second volume, although that was to a certain degree of ambiguity with calling it The Two Towers, even though that title gets as near as possible to finding a title to cover the widely divergent books 3 and 4. The trouble here was that the Two Towers might refer to Isengard and Barad-dur, or to Minas Tirith, or to Isengard and Cirith Ungol. For Volume 1, though, he at least admitted that The Fellowship of the Ring will do, I think, and fits well with the fact that the last chapter of the volume is the breaking of the Fellowship. Now, whether Tolkien or Rayner noted the fact that the group is never named the Fellowship at all within either Volume 1 or Volume 2, and within Volume 3 not until very near to the end, is not evident. It does appear that Tolkien, at least, acknowledged it in some way by suggesting at one point The Journey of the Nine Companions as a possible title. As for the usage in the final printing, though, do we have that ambiguity as we have with The Two Towers? I mean, is the Fellowship as used here the name of the group, or the basis by which the group is brought together? As with The Two Towers, either option would seem to apply, but whichever it is, the name has stuck for the group. After all, as noted in the prologue, it is how the group seems to be referred to in the days after the War of the Ring and the Return of the King. The Hobbit members of the Fellowship. And, of course, the breaking of the Fellowship in the Tale of Years. And in a way, it is a better way to refer to the group. Certainly better than the less meaningful and fairly generic company, in that fellowship embraces the very idea of unity, different groups banding together to achieve a common end. In this case, nothing less than the destruction of evil. Again, founded on a hope, but a hope which is fulfilled. And the notion of fellowship, therefore, is both an apt description as well as an inspiration to this new world of the Fourth Age, under the newly returned king, in which that evil has been destroyed. That is quite possibly the best reason for the name being applied to the group once everything was over and done with, and how we, and the world of Middle-earth too, eventually comes to know them. Meanwhile, we do get to see some of Tolkien's other suggested titles appearing in print, in the form of those manuscript History of the Lord of the Rings volumes edited by Christopher Tolkien. And we get one last moment with the word, in lowercase, at the Grey Havens, when Gandalf tells the three hobbits who will be departing back to the Shire after they have said goodbye to Frodo and Bilbo, "Well, here at last, dear friends, on the shores of the sea comes the end of our fellowship in Middle-earth. Go in peace. I will not say, do not weep, for not all tears are an evil." And so, Aragorn, calling the group the Fellowship of the Ring, is one of the little things that I love in The Lord of the Rings. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.